Hello and welcome to Ultimate Excel VBA. My name is Mark and I'm going to be your coach and mentor and guide moving forward. What we're going to do here is just lay out a few of the course expectations and give you an idea what you can expect going forward, as well as a few of the things that I might expect out of you as a student. Let's begin at, of course, the beginning with a definition. What is VBA? Now, if you've signed up for this course, then you've probably gathered that it's the macro language of Microsoft Excel. In other words, it's a programming language used to automate and extend Microsoft Excel. It really is much more than that. We're going to use a broader definition. VBA is actually the macro language of all of Office. And even though your interests might lie primarily in Excel, there's some powerful implications to this that we're going to get to a little bit more in just a minute. First of all, what can you do with VBA? Well, if you've already messed around a little bit with the macro recorder, then you know that you can save yourself some keystrokes and some mouse clicks by recording some actions and playing them back, little short utilities. You can automate redundant tasks this way, and it is, of course, a great help. In a more extended way, you can automate long or repetitive processes. For example, if you're routinely formatting large quantities of data a certain way, it's a great time saver to be able to assign a macro to this task and let it run through this very time-consuming process in a few seconds. You can create full-blown custom applications using Excel as the development platform. This really is the big enchilada of VBA programming because it allows you to use Excel's tremendous data management capabilities and stitch together a full-blown application using VBA as both the brains and the glue that holds it all together. You can execute certain tasks automatically in response to user actions or at specific times or intervals. For example, when the worksheet opens, or when the workbook opens or closes, or when a worksheet is activated, or at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or every 5 minutes. The possibilities are pretty much endless. You can redefine Excel's default behavior in response to user actions, such as what happens when you right-click or double-click. Maybe you don't want to right-click on the worksheet to mean pop up a right-click menu. Maybe you want it to mean something else. Well, you can redefine those things. You can extend the Excel user interface to use common graphical controls such as checkboxes, scroll bars, scrolling lists. Pretty much all of the things that you find in a graphical user interface you can employ directly on your worksheets in Excel, as well as on your own forms. And all of those custom forms can become part of the Excel workbook. You can reach into other Office applications or Windows itself to perform tasks far beyond what Excel alone is capable of doing. This is what we alluded to earlier. What do I mean by that, really? Well, imagine a macro that you write in Excel doing the following things. First, it reaches into Access and it performs a query on your database, and it retrieves those results back to Excel. In Excel, it constructs a chart from the results of that query. Then it reaches into Word, where it creates a new report from a template, and it drops that newly created chart into a report. And then the same macro reaches into Outlook, attaches the report to an email, and emails it out to a group of recipients in your address book. That'll give you an idea of some of the power of what's available in VBA with its ability to reach across applications. Now, you won't be able to do this exactly when you're finished with this course, especially if you're brand new to programming, but you'll be well on your way to doing this, and you'll certainly see how it's possible. So the more of an open mind you move forward with, the more you'll get out of this, because you'll see that there's such a tremendous amount of utility that's available, especially when you start thinking broader than just Microsoft Excel. What do you need to know to begin? Well, as far as your Excel experience goes, believe it or not, you don't really need to know that much. We're not really doing that much in Excel. We're doing much more in the VBA editor, which is a whole different thing. Now, the more you know about Excel, the more you're going to get out of this course, because that's just the way it works. You'll be having many more of those moments where you'll see, you'll be saying to yourself, "Oh, I see how I can use this," and that's of course a great benefit. But if you don't know that much about Excel, it's not going to hold you back. You should experiment with the macro recorder before diving deeply into VBA. Now we're going to, in our first couple of lessons, experiment a little bit with the macro recorder, but we're not going to go into it in great detail. That doesn't mean it's a waste of time. It just means that you're really here to learn to write macros, not to record them. But that doesn't mean it's not a decent learning tool to be able to do some experimentation on your own. As far as your programming experience, this is a beginning course, all right? It's designed for busy people who haven't been, learning to become crack programmers in their spare time, but want to give it a try. Now, of course, if you have some programming experience, that's going to benefit you, and you'll be able to grasp things much faster. But I'm not going to assume that you know that. If you've taken a basic programming course, again, you may be able to fast forward through a few of the lessons here and there, but for the most part, we're going to try to bring everybody along together. Now, Excel versions. Regarding this, I've used Excel 2013 and Office 2013 in the cross-application examples, but you can easily use any version from 2007 or later. The differences are not that great. There's some minor cosmetic differences in the ribbon, but nothing that would prevent you from following along. The steps to save a file have changed a little bit across versions, mainly because the File tab wasn't there in Excel 2007 and they introduced it later on. But again, if you're taking this course, I'm assuming you know how to save a file, and that's not going to trip you up. The Developer tab, likewise, which we're going to do right off the bat in the very next lesson, the screencast will cover how to display the Developer tab in 2010 and later. But in 2007, it's a little bit different. So rather than following the screencast on that, what you'll do is you'll go to the Excel options, which is under that round Office button. And under that first category there called Popular, there is a option Show Developer tab in the ribbon. You'll just check that box and you'll be good to go. Everything else you can follow pretty much step for step as we move along. Now, how best to learn? A couple of recommendations here. First of all, download the lecture files. I'm going to have files that represent either starting points and finished points of every lecture. Now, in some cases, there will only be a finished version if we're starting with a new blank document, for example. But if we're starting with a workbook that might already have some data in it or have a little bit of code in it already, I'll have both versions associated with each lecture. One of the reasons to download these, as well as doing it on your own, is to have the comments that go along with it, because I'll be inserting comments in my code that will further clarify what we've done in each section. Type the code in your own workbook. Yes, you should actually type it. Don't just watch it on the screencast. What you want to do is try it yourself, run it. Try to reproduce the output that's in the screencast. Then tweak something and try it again. This is really how you learn. Don't be afraid to pause the screencast and do a little experimentation. Try changing a few things in the code and see what happens. That's really the best way to learn. Practice, practice, practice. Now, I always say this is a lot like learning to play the piano. In other words, you don't learn to play the piano by watching people play the piano. You don't learn to play the piano by reading books about playing the piano. You have to spend time with your hands on the keyboard, and that's exactly what it's like with this. You want to spend as much time as possible trying things, typing things in, running it, making mistakes, and along those lines, finally, be patient. It's going to seem like very slow going, but this is normal. If you're brand new to this, remember that people spend years learning to become good programmers, so you shouldn't expect to pick it up in a weekend. It's just not that kind of thing. But the more interest you have in it, the more that will motivate you going forward. You're going to find that it's fun. It really is. There's a real thrill to seeing your macros streamline something that might have taken you hours and hours before, and watch your macro take off and run through something in a few seconds. There's a real feeling of empowerment and a real feeling of satisfaction that comes from that. And that can be a great motivator. So without too much more delay, we're going to jump right into Excel and start to take a look at what happens when you record a macro and then start diving into the code in more and more and more detail. So we'll see you in the next lesson. Let's jump in and start learning some programming.